Demon Kissed, Chapter 25. "Any word yet on Alistair's condition?" I asked Rose softly, rather than respond to her question, and she shook her head. "Not yet, but you know how Nick can be sometimes, and Kate did head out with him," she said quietly, and shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "You do realize that you were praying and calling your power when you brought her back just now, right?" she asked, and I blinked, then shook my head. "Was there something else you needed, Roz?" I asked her, turning back to my bed and bending to check Aaron's pulse and breathing again. I could hear both vital signs clearly with my enhanced hearing, but wanted to check them manually and assure myself that they truly were there and not just my mind playing tricks on me. Her breathing was slow and even, and her pulse, though still a bit thready, was regular enough that I could leave the room and not worry about that she would die in my absence. Turning to face Roz once more, I gestured her out of the room and followed her out, closing the door behind me. "Rosalind, I know there was more on your mind than my love life. What is it?" I said, and waited for her to answer. "It's nothing, really. I wanted to reassure myself that you were indeed alive," she said, shrugging, and turned away to head down the hall in the opposite direction of the stairs. "Rosie, I have all of you girls to thank for my life, and I know it. But nothing good will come of mentioning my feelings for Aaron to Alistair. I know you wouldn't say anything to him regardless of the situation, but, Roz, on this I ask for your word. Will you give it?" I said, and she stopped, then turned to face me. "Of course, but may I ask why you require it here, when you never have before, Mareike?" she said, regarding me curiously, and I glanced back at my bedroom door for a moment. "This time is different, Roz. I can't put my finger on how it is different, but it is, and I'd rather avoid as much trouble as I can for now," I told her, and she smiled at me before turning around again to continue walking down the hall. "By the way, you're the only male on this floor. Mikhail and Kate are on the second floor, and Nick has the next floor up all to himself," she called softly over her shoulder, opening a door 5 doors down from mine, and disappearing into the room beyond. "I'm the only male on the 3rd floor?" I mentally repeated. Why did Dom put me on this floor if he knew I would be the only male? I wondered, turning around and re-entering my room. He had most likely put me on this floor because the women were the only ones, besides Cade, who could heal me from the hawthorn poisoning, and probably intended to move me to the 2nd floor after I was recovered enough that the girls wouldn't have to look after me any longer. I reasoned, and then shook my head as I moved to the bed. Though it made sense and was logical to assume that Dom had intended to do just that, I knew the man. Dominic was not, as a rule, a very logical being, and probably had another reason entirely for putting me on the 3rd floor that had absolutely nothing to do with my recovery, and everything to do with having a male he knew he could trust completely near his private rooms. Or I could be off the mark entirely on both counts, and he was planning on me staying on the women's floor, I mused, kneeling beside the bed and picking up Erin's wrist to check her pulse again. Closing my eyes, I focused entirely on Erin's pulse rate and sent my mind skimming through her body to check for internal issues I may have missed nearly 2 weeks ago in the rush to stop the bleeding and save her life. I carefully checked her heart for damage that might explain its stopping earlier, but found nothing and moved on to the rest of her vital organs: liver, kidneys, lungs, and brain. Nothing showed any signs of injury, and I frowned. I checked her non-vital organs next, and found nothing in error with them either. I pulled my mental self back from my examination and looked at her face. Up until a little more than 3 months ago, I had been one of her main partners on hunts, and I had tended to more of her injuries from them than I cared to think of, and had used that experience with her medical history to convince Alistair to allow me to tend her after the emergency was over. Perhaps I should have let Aya take care of her instead, but at the time I hadn't wanted to let anyone other than Isaac near her while she was unconscious and unable to defend herself. And after that? What was your excuse then? A voice in my mind asked, and I examined the question carefully, thinking back over the last week I had spent changing her bandages. I had originally planned to turn Erin's general care over to Aya once she had regained consciousness, but I had continued to look after her once she had, and now I didn't know what to do. Then I thought back over the last 11 years, and all the time I had spent teaching her how to hunt, track, kill, or incapacitate supernatural beings safely, trying to find an answer that should have been obvious but wasn't easy to see. The first time I met Erin, she had been a strong-headed, scrappy 14-year-old, and she'd been so damn angry at the world that she had trouble working with the other humans in the hunter group. I remembered, standing up again and pulling the blankets over her. I then moved to the other side of the bed. Laying on my back on top of the covers, I folded my arms on the pillow behind my head and closed my eyes, remembering. Gods, she'd been a cute little thing, and mean as a viper if crossed by one of the males in the group. Much like a viper, she would lie in wait for the offending party and strike quickly, then seem to vanish. At least, that had been my experience when I told her that there was no way in hell that I would take her out hunting until she was properly trained. I remembered, too, that she had damn near killed Frank Rosen once. Gods, when he had told her she'd be better off as what they referred to as a baser than being trained to go out into the field, the look that crossed her eyes was nothing less than rage. I hadn't thought a human could be that damn dumb, but Frank had proven me wrong that day. I had seen her training in the gun course earlier that day, and had stopped to read her scores, then had watched her work through it. I had seen her determination to become part of the team in the way she moved quickly and efficiently from section to section of the indoor gun obstacle course, and I had seen that same look of rage in her eyes when she was focused on a target. I rolled over onto my side and propped my head on my right hand, and placing my left hand on the side of her neck, I watched her face while she slept. I frowned a bit as I finished the memory. When she was focused on a target, she was focused on the target, and when she pulled the trigger 7 out of 10 times, it was a kill shot. I wasn't really surprised when she drew her gun. I was surprised by her speed, though, when that bit of stupidity had left his mouth. She'd pulled it and leveled it at his chest so fast that I barely kept track of the movement of her hands. She had pulled the trigger twice before Frank really had time to register what she'd done, and I nearly hadn't been fast enough to knock her hands to the side and throw her aim off. I had kept thinking right up to that millisecond that Cap was right to leave the then 16-year-old Erin at base while the rest of the team went out on patrol every night and day. But the second I saw how fast she reacted with lethal force to what I later learned was a verbal assault and began working with her, I came to the realization that, although her skills in hand-to-hand could use a little bit of work, she was more than ready to patrol the streets with the rest of us. Maybe I'm too close to the problem, I mused. I had spent the last 11 years with her nearly every day, after all, and I had probably gotten closer to her than was wise during that time. Not as close as most of the men on the teams had assumed, but close enough, apparently, to fall for her, and if the way I had reacted earlier was any indication, I'd fallen hard, I thought, and yawned. Raising my head from my hand, I looked over my shoulder to the windows and tried to gauge the time by the position of the sunlight filtering in through it. I judged it might be somewhere around noon, and thought about getting up and fetching something to eat from the kitchen when Erin murmured uneasily in her sleep and drew my attention back to her. Her eyes were shifting back and forth under her closed eyelids, and a frown creased her brow. I moved my left hand down to her collarbone and rubbed it gently with my fingers until her face relaxed again a few moments later. It was a trick I had learned years ago when she was hurt and having nightmares, that never failed to calm her mind and let her rest undisturbed. "What am I going to do with you, baby?" I whispered to her, moving my hand back up to her neck. Hells, what am I going to do with myself, for that matter? I now know that I'm in love with her, but I sure as all hells can't have her. She was Alistair's to claim, if he ever got the chance to do so. So where did that leave me? What did it leave me with? I wondered, then closed my eyes and laid my head on my right arm as the answer drifted through my mind. It left me out in the cold, my heart in the hands of a woman that I could never breathe a word of my feelings to, and one I could never have. I knew from experience that being in love was never an easy thing for anyone. But to be in love with a good friend's woman, and being forced to hold that feeling inside all the time I was near her, it would be sheer torture for me. The when or how of the emotion didn't really matter. What mattered was what I did with it from here, and I had no clue how I was going to deal with it, but knew that I was going to have to deal with it eventually. Suddenly the green stone around my neck became very hot against my skin, drawing me away from my thoughts, and I pulled it quickly from under my shirt to look at it. The stone was glowing brightly, and the center of the light was flickering urgently. Dropping it back onto my shirt, I brought my thumb to my mouth and bit into it hard enough to draw blood, then touched the stone with it. The glow steadied, and the stone cooled immediately. "I'm here," I thought, and felt relief drift down the now open telepathic blood link that the stone provided for those members of the Black Rose that were not telepathic by nature. "I know you're tending Erin at the moment, Merrick, but I need you here." Dom's mental voice sounded tired, and became more so as he continued. "Before you ask, yes, I got to Alistair before the humans could kill him. However, he's not in very good shape physically, and psychically he's not home. I've tried to reach him telepathically, but he either won't respond or can't, and I don't have the power to bring him back on my own right now. I had to give him a good deal of my blood to kickstart his healing, and had to use a lot of my reserve power to hold his soul to this plane while I was at it. Licking the remaining blood off of my thumb, I rolled to my back and focused on the link. "How bad are his injuries, Dom?" I asked, and wondered if I currently had enough power to do a major healing spell if I had to. Possibly 2 major healing spells, if Dom was as exhausted as I sensed he was. "I can't list them, damn it. They fucked him over, Merrick. They fucked him over good, and they had him staked to a fucking cross when Cade and I got here. They practically crucified him. All they had left to do was run a silver rod through his heart, and they'd have fucking killed him." The rage I sensed under the words echoing in my head made my hair stand on end. It was so powerful, and the mental images that accompanied them made my stomach roll with nausea. "I'll be there as soon as I can, Dom, but I can't use the link to track you through the stone," I said, sitting up slowly so I didn't disturb Erin, and swinging my legs over the side of the bed. "Can you track Cade? Because, Merrick, I have no God's be damned clue where we are at the moment, and quite frankly, I don't give a flying fuck. All I give a fuck about right now is tracking Feaster down again and killing the bastard as slowly and painfully as I possibly can," he said, and I belatedly realized that he was barely in control of the rage. Dom wasn't prone to swearing as a general rule, But when he was enraged, he swore frequently, and had a tendency to forget nearly everything but the curses in his vocabulary. He also had a tendency to hunt down and massacre the beings responsible for pissing him off in the first place. Dom, I need you to remain where you are and get that rage under control until I get there, I said, and heard a mental growl from him, but the rage I could sense lessened. Can you track Cade, Merrick? He asked again. Yes, I can. But I will most likely need both of you to help me with the healing, so I really need you sane and in control, Dominic, I said, and stood from the bed. Moving quietly and quickly, I headed for the door and left the bedroom. Merrick, Nick just closed off his mind and I can't find him in the house, Shay called from the second floor, and I jogged toward the stairs. I didn't see her when I hit the second-floor hallway and continued jogging to the first-floor stairs. Taking them two at a time, I reached the first floor and focused on the stone again now that I was away from my room. Dom, is my medical bag here at the house, or is it still at Alistair's? I asked, and sniffed the air to catch Shay's scent. Picking it up immediately, I followed it to the kitchen and entered the room. I scanned the room, and, not seeing her, I headed for the cellar door. It should be in the med room I set up for you in the second basement. Just follow your nose. His reply was distracted, and I could sense that he was dividing his attention between me and something else on his end. Deciding to let him focus on his surroundings, I thanked him and opened the door to the stairs. Shaya? I called, making my way down the steps quickly and heading for the door to the second basement. Opening that door, I headed down the stairs and called her name again. Merrick? Anya's voice called back to me. Yeah, Anya, I was looking for Shay. Have you seen her? I called, leaving the stairs and moving through the exercise room to where she was now standing. Yes, she just went down to the studio, she said, and I changed direction. I stopped in front of the open door and called to Shay again, then returned to Anya. Do you know where the medic room is down here? I asked her, and turned slightly to watch the door to the studio for Shay. Yes, she said, glancing at my chest and adding, I assume Nick's called you out to help with Alistair and you need your bag. Come, I'll show you where it is. And turned toward the standing sandbags. I watched her as she moved around them and opened a door behind them. Hearing fast footsteps on the stairs leading down, I glanced toward the studio door again and saw Shay emerge from the stairs. Waving her to follow me, I turned and headed for the med room that Anya had just entered. Where are Rose and Roz? I will need them to head out with me, I said to Anya as I entered the room. Took it in a single glance and spotted my bag on the desk. Moving to it quickly, I opened it and checked the contents to make sure I had everything I would need. Gauze pads, bandages, that seemed to be the only things I was low on. Rosalind is in her room, I think, and Rosalind is in the ground floor office, she said. Please fetch them and have them meet me in the foyer. I'll be heading out as soon as I have everything I need, I said, not looking at her, and moving around the room, opening cabinets and grabbing more supplies. The place seemed to be better stocked than most hospitals before the fall, and I thanked the gods for it. Yes, she said, and I sensed her leave the room. Merrick, Dom's, Shay started to say, and I interrupted her. Yes, I know. I'm heading out now to help him with Alistair. I need you to head upstairs to my room and watch over Aaron for me while I'm gone, I said, dropping supplies in my bag and closing it. Picking it up, I brushed past her and headed out the door. I could feel her right behind me as I went up the stairs and figured she would stop me once we reached the kitchen to ask questions. But when we reached it, she ran past me and went through the door ahead of me. Where are you, Merrick? Dom's voice echoed through my mind in demand. I'm headed out the door as we speak. I was getting more supplies in hands, I replied, running down the hall to the foyer, and nearly collided with Rosalind, who came barreling down the stairs at the same time I reached it. "Where are we going?" she asked, pulling the front door open and stepping outside. "To help Dom and Cade with Alistair. Where's Rose?" I said, following her out and off the porch. "She's waiting for us by the side gate," she said, and headed off to the left at a run. Keeping up with her easily, I murmured an unseelie tracking spell along with Cade's entire name, including titles, under my breath, and watched as a golden streak of light darted over the ground, heading to the right of the gate as we went through it. "This way. Follow me," I said, changing direction in mid-stride and running after the light. "Why do you need us?" Rosalind asked, coming up to run beside me on my right, and I glanced at her. "I don't think I have enough power to do a major healing spell at the moment, and if I have to do one, I would rather have some extra hands to help," I replied, and changed direction again, following the tracker light down a side street toward the south. "Makes sense," Roz said, falling in to run on my left, and I nodded. The light veered left, and I pulled ahead of Roz to cut in front of her and follow it. She and Rose pulled back to run behind me. The tracker was heading away from the direction of Alistair's territory toward our Azul's in the south near the dome, and I picked up speed, hoping it wouldn't lead us into the dome itself. The light veered left again, going around the dome, and my feet slid out from under me as I changed direction to follow it. Growling low in frustration, I scrambled to regain my footing and dropped my medic bag in the process. Rosalind's dark red fox form darted past me and picked it up on her way by. Following closely on her heels was Roz in her black fox form. They both ran around the next corner after the light and vanished from sight before I could catch my balance, and I tripped trying to follow them. Landing on one knee, I swore and stayed down for a second, panting for breath. I still wasn't completely healed from the poisoning, and as a result I couldn't handle running flat out in my normal form for long periods yet. However, when I had shifted earlier, I had noticed that the weakness left over from the poisoning was much less, and figuring that if I shifted to my lion form now it would be the same, I tapped my pendant and called the shift. Near excruciating pain washed through me as the change took hold, and I growled low in my throat, gritting my teeth. It usually never hurt when I shifted forms, but the pain I felt now, and the slight pain I'd felt before, let me know that I would need to take a very long nap when my work was done to finish recovering my strength. I felt my clothes vanish as my necklace transformed into a harness and fur ran over my skin. Then bones broke to reform into the shape of a lion's limbs and body. The change only took a second, though, and I stood on all fours when it was done, breathing hard. Shaking my head to be rid of the post-shift dizziness, I leapt forward and ran full out around the corner after the girls. I was able to use my nose to figure out where they had gone, and followed their scents down several streets, finally catching up with them outside a business building. The tracking light was circling the building and terminated as soon as I approached it. Slowing my pace to a walk, I glanced over my shoulder and mentally retraced our route here, and realized that we weren't that far from Dominic's home in Northside. The scent of blood hung heavy in the air outside the building, so that I gagged and swiped a paw over my nose to keep from sneezing as I came closer to it. Some of the blood scent was human, but not as strong as the rest of the scent. The rest of the blood scent was vampire, and it was nearly overwhelming, it was so strong. I wouldn't be surprised if the walls of the place had been painted with Alistair's blood before the humans strung him up, and I was betting that Dom and Cade had added a fresh coat on top of it made out of human blood. Roz and Rose both shifted back to Feyan form as soon as I reached them, and waited for me to do the same. I drew as deep a breath as I could manage with the horrible smell, and reached for my Feyan form. The pain was more intense this time, and when it was done I lay on the ground, trying not to throw up from it. "Merrick, are you all right?" Roz asked, kneeling beside me, and I nodded. "Just a bit tired, pet. Quick shifting was never my forte," I said breathlessly, and got to my hands and knees. "Great gods of mercy!" I groaned mentally as I forced myself to my feet, and pain cascaded through every muscle and joint in my body in protest of the movement. The gods have no mercy this day, Merrick. Now get your ass in here and help me. Dom's voice snarled in my mind, and I winced, putting a hand to my head. Dominic is waiting within. Let's not keep him, I told the girls, and nearly fell on my face when I took a step forward. Roz grabbed my arm and held me upright for a moment, then let go when I was steady. Are you sure you're in any kind of shape to be doing this? Rose asked, and I laughed darkly. No, but I sure as all the hells don't sense anyone else here who can do what needs to be done, and I do not think he thought to call anyone else either. Do you? I said, and waved Roz off when I noticed her hovering next to me. She gave me an incredulous look, but backed off and joined her cousin at the door. Moving slowly, I walked over to them and held my hand out for my medical bag. Rose handed it over without argument and turned to push the slightly ajar door all the way open. The thick smell of blood and other matter washed out of the doorway, and all three of us gagged. "Oh, gods!" Roz wheezed, and then began coughing. "The gods had nothing to do with this, dearest cousin," Cade said as he appeared in the doorway covered in stuff, and held the door for us to enter. "Cade, how bad is it?" Rose asked him, voice choked. "It's bad enough that the pit bull there lost his lunch while he was killing one of the bastards that did this. Enter, see for yourselves, and for the love of fuck, hurry." Dominic's voice answered from the darkness beyond him, and she blanched. It apparently took a lot to make Cade throw up, I thought. "One should not swear in the presence of a lady," I stated, and wrinkling my nose at the stench of slaughter coming off of the unseelie male in waves and out of the building's dim interior, stepped into the building itself. I could hear something in the wide space dripping, and shuddered as my eyes adjusted. "One should not bring a lady into a place of carnage like this," Dom snapped back, his voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room from a dark doorway at the far end. "Ease off, Nick. They're here just like you ordered," Cade snapped, and moved past me farther into the building. I tracked him with my gaze and saw him stepping over, on, and through pools of blood, piles of viscera, and other unidentifiable matter scattered on the floor. Dominic's choice of words a moment ago seemed somehow appropriate to me as I gazed in fascinated horror at the mess spread out before me like some kind of lumpy, macabre carpet. I remembered seeing something similar once, years ago, in a movie about a psychotic serial killer, only the movie people had apparently gotten the amount of blood wrong, and they hadn't used pieces of meat to decorate the walls. Following Cade through this room of horror might very well be one of the hardest, most vile things I will ever do in my whole life, I thought, and moved forward to follow him through the door. "Good gods!" Rosalind whispered beside me and gripped my forearm tightly. "The gods had nothing to do with it, sister mine. This glorious masterpiece of massacre is brought to you courtesy of Dominic and yours truly," Cade said, and stepped through a wide doorway at the far end of the room. I didn't bother to try and not step in anything as I walked through the room to the doorway. The carnage was everywhere on the floor, though I did try my best not to slip and fall in the mess. The very last thing I wanted at the moment was to be covered in the bloody stuff coating the floor, walls, and ceiling. I shuddered at the thought and stepped through the doorway. I stopped just inside the door to stare at what the damned humans had done to Alistair, and hoped they were all roasting in one of the 9 hells. "What in the name of all unholy fuck did they do to him?" I demanded, and ran forward. "I fucking told you. They bloody crucified him to the wall. Cade and I had to leave him up here, like this, because we needed more people to get him the hells off the damn thing." Dom growled at me, gesturing at the makeshift cross on the wall that held one of our most powerful master vampires prisoner, and I felt a deep, cold rage ignite in my heart. The bastards had done more than just crucify the vampire. They'd tortured him extensively before hanging him up, I realized after a quick visual examination of his wounds, and throttled back a roar of rage. "We've enough hands now. Here, help me get him down," I said coldly, and dropping my bag, I reached up to pry one of the spikes from Alistair's right arm, and the blood-soaked wood beneath him. The metal was embedded deeply in the wood of the cross, and when I finally pulled it free of his flesh, it left behind a blackened, bloodless hole in his arm. Dom hissed in pain beside me, and the scent of burning flesh briefly covered the stench of drying blood and new death. I looked at the spike I held in my hand and swore viciously in my own language. They weren't steel spikes like I had originally assumed. They were silver stakes. Dropping the vile thing on the ground, I began wrestling the other three out of him as carefully as I could, and swore that I'd heal him completely of this nightmare of injuries, or die in the trying of it. He made no sound as we all worked to get him down as gently and quickly as we could. The only good thing that I could see about the villain's use of silver was that the wounds had been cauterized by it, and there was minimal bleeding from the holes the stakes left behind. "I wish to hells you two would have left at least one of the bastards for me to kill," I growled, when we finally had him off the cross and lying on the cleanest part of the floor we could find. Looking at the damage done to him, I felt rage building deep inside and took a deep breath. There was no one left to kill, and getting pissed now wouldn't do Alistair any good. I needed to calm down and heal him so that we could track down who ordered this and kill them slowly for it.